On this episode of News from the Krabby Coffee Shop, we apologize for something, we read your emails, and we discuss the fate of the North American continent. Should we get the apology out of the way right now, Amy Daniels?
That feels like the right thing to do. What are we apologizing for?
Not releasing the show yesterday at 6 p.m. We had a guest line up. I can't decide if I should say who it is or not.
Don't say who it is. Yeah. Just say what happened.
Right. So it was a local news anchor. We had her booked for maybe a month or so. Really excited about this. The reason I booked her is because she's really, really good at Twitter, and she is way, way too emotionally involved in the success of our local sports teams. I mean, it's over the top. And I can only imagine she's had her heart broke many, many times. So I wanted to counsel her about that.
Just help her get past that.
Yeah, we're never going to win, ever. You gotta control yourself.
And this person who we may talk to again someday, so let's go ahead and not piss them off.
Yeah, no.
But are they a lifelong Minnesotan?
Yes.
So how could they not have learned this lesson yet?
I know.
I don't understand what your hope, where does this hope come from?
I know. It's way too optimistic.
It's unnecessary, and it's only going to lead to heartbreak.
So anyway, a jet, and we normally record on Tuesdays. A jet originating in Minneapolis crashed in Canada, so then she had to interview one of the passengers, so she had to cancel. So we called on an expert in all things Minnesota sports, so we can... Actually, what we're going to do is talk diplomatic relations with this guest and hope our nations, maybe we can heal this rift between our nations.
Yeah. I think that, when I sit in my house and I think, God, things are tense between Canada and the United States. Yeah. What could we do about that? I think, who could fix this? Kenny Olson.
Yeah. Well, it's either going to get better or worse after tonight. But first, let's go to our emails. I got an email from a guy. Remember, I read an email last week from a guy who saw a naked lady putting a Lego village together.
Yeah.
You got another email about that. Where can I find the stream of the naked lady building a Lego set? Pal, believe me, I looked and looked and looked. I couldn't find it either.
You know what? I just had a conversation yesterday, not about naked Lego building, with two adults. One who had just been to Target to buy the, I think it was the Polaroid camera set that they have right now, and another adult who had just picked up a Lego set.
Wait a minute, you can buy Polaroid cameras?
It's like a retro-looking Polaroid, like land camera, they used to call it.
Yeah.
And it's a Lego set.
Oh.
And so but you get you build the camera, and also they had a little cartridge of film that you would put in the camera.
I stopped listening.
Oh, great.
So wait a minute.
Anyway.
So wait a minute. I did hear you put film in the camera, so it does work?
Oh, God, Kenny. I don't even know.
I'm in and out of
it does
one.
not. I know. Your intention is in and out, which makes it feel like I'm saying every other word. It's a Polaroid camera made of Legos. So no, it doesn't take pictures. Okay?
All right. Well, call me when it does.
Okay. So what are you obsessing on the naked lady Lego? Is that where your mind still is?
No, you said Polaroid, and it's like, oh my God, I want a Polaroid. Just as soon as you said Polaroid.
Okay, ADHD. Wow, shiny object. Okay. All right.
David writes, I met John Hines a couple of years ago at my job. I told him how I used to listen to him when I was a kid, and he thought I meant LOL, but I told him we went all the way back to Hines and Bush on 15, the music station. Yeah, and then he said we both felt old. Now, you're pretty old. You're pushing 80 now?
Why do I do this show, Kyle?
I think that David was introduced to Hines and Bush and Knapp and Bush the same way I was, and I didn't realize until I read this part of his letter. Fall of 74, I was in 6th grade, and we had a new school bus with a radio. And that's when he started hearing first Knapp and Bush and then Hines and Bush. He used to write them letters. They'd read them, et cetera, et cetera. So he's been familiar with years. And I've been trying to remember as a kid, for a few years, I lived in Prior Lake. And I think in 4th and 5th grade, I listened to the radio on that school bus. I think that's how I was introduced to hit radio. Do you remember?
That makes so much sense. I mean, the minute you said that,
Yeah.
I had totally forgotten about that. I've never thought about that in however many years, 100.
Yeah.
But when I think back, yeah, that is sort of in the morning and in the afternoon.
Right.
That's where you would hear radio, right?
Yeah.
It's on the school bus, and it depended on what bus driver you had.
Right.
Like some of them were cool, and they'd listen to the cool stations, and other ones listened to the less cool stations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
and
do
also
remember that.
in the late 70s, that's when KDWB FM came about and KQRS. And that was kind of weed smoking radio. We're all
Right.
very chill, listening
Yeah.
to Pink Floyd and Zeppelin. And yeah.
Just remember, children, Kenny and Aunt Amy are old.
Yeah.
And when Kenny says AM radio, that at some point KDWB became an FM radio station.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
was 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But before that, it was 63 KDWB.
63 KDWB.
Yeah, and 1130 WDGY.
Yeah.
Those
yeah.
were the two top 40 stations
And
that
15,
battled.
the music station.
Yep, yep.
Us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, great. God, I just loved radio from that period. And I still, from time to time, when I'm driving overnight, that's my favorite time to be out and about on the highway, because you can pick up like BBM out of Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
780 WBBM, the news station. Yeah, I'm still a radio nerd.
Isn't that funny? And it used to amaze me as a kid. I'm sure a lot of people feel this way, that you could listen to a station. I remember hearing LS in Chicago.
Yep.
WLS you could hear at night mostly.
The big one in Cincinnati, Denver radio station, a St. Louis radio station, WJR in Detroit. Yeah, all of those.
I know. Back in
And
the olden days, children, when everyone listened to the same couple things.
Yep. And 1500 was directional west. So you could hear our signal 1500 like out in Yellowstone, Montana, and Wyoming. It's surreal.
Isn't that crazy? It's got a pretty strong signal, but like us nerds in radio call it, it's directional. So it's better to the west than it
So
is the
you
east.
can't hear it in Hudson, Wisconsin.
Nope.
But you can hear it in Wyoming.
But if you're Wyoming, we got you.
One more email, and I really love this one. Good morning. Last week when I heard you start with the age debate, I instantly got angry. Before a word was even spoken, I was irate because I know how this normally goes for millennials. And then I get through the show happy as a pig in slop. I said to myself, holy crap, someone gets it. I am a millennial by default. I run an auto shop. I'm the vice president of a veterans nonprofit. Went to war at 19 in the Iraq campaign. I am a disabled vet and still farm my hobby farm with an M Farmall and an Oliver Super 88. Those are old tractors.
Okay.
Thanks for not being a Joe. I think he's making reference to my best friend Joe Souchere.
Right.
And that's from Jason and Wadena. And yeah, I get it, Jason. The millennials and what's the generation?
Gen Z.
Gen Zs. They're great kids.
They are.
They're hard. The ones I know are hardworking.
Well, and what he's referring to, if you didn't hear last week, is that we ended the podcast after talking about all of them. We talked about the silent generation, the greatest generation, the boomers, the Xers,
Yeah.
of which you and I are a part of, the Xers.
Yep.
Then we both concluded that Gen Z, which was your original theory, Gen Z and millennials are the greatest generation
Yeah.
ever.
And my generation, Gen X, just shut up. We're sick of hearing from you. Seriously. Every kid I know drank out of the hose, okay? You're not special.
Let's see,
Stop
and
thinking you
I'm
are.
just barely an Xer, and I'm going to piss people off by saying this, but it's the boomers that drive me insane. Yeah, your music was the greatest ever, blah, 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 blah. There's been music since, okay, we didn't top out in 1969. There's been music since then.
Speaking of music, I know what my next job is going to be. I want to work at a yacht rock station overnight. Overnight
real?
yacht rock. And I want to be live. I don't want to voice track. I don't want to record it in the afternoon and play it back. And I got to talk to our boss because she owns a bunch of radio stations.
Why yacht rock? What's your favorite thing about that?
It just makes me feel good. It's like eating hot dish.
Like Sailing by Christopher Cross.
Yeah, all of that crap.
Firefall.
All of that.
Ambrosia.
Yeah. All of it. Every single one.
Toto.
All those songs I hated when I was growing up, that's what I
They
want to
are
do now.
comfort food, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have like a favorite, like a song that when you hear it, or a band that when you hear it from that era and that kind of music?
Brandy.
Oh, You're a Fine Girl.
Yeah. Yeah. What a good wife you'd be.
Yeah, right. Of course.
Those damn sailors in the sea.
Those damn. And I remember loving that song and like getting very emotional about it when I would listen to it as a kid.
Yeah.
And what do I have in common with a sailor in the sea?
Nothing. We're in the middle
Like,
of the
what was I
country.
getting misty-eyed about?
Yeah. Yeah.
But Brandy, she was a fine girl, and then she was going to be a good wife, but then he had to go back out to sea.
And one of the great things in the fall, I help a guy with harvesting, and it's the only time I listen to the radio. And I go between 3 different AOR radio stations, adult rock radio stations, and they still play all of those songs. They're
do?
still, yeah. They're still in rotation. All of these songs we grew up with. And for me, I love it because I don't listen to radio otherwise.
Well, and when you were growing up, Kenny, did you ever think when you heard, my son was playing the other day, You Are the Woman, and I was like, who did this song? So I looked it up, and it was Firefall.
Yeah.
And I remember the song when it came out in whatever it was, mid to late, I think it was late 70s, like 77, 78. And did you think, when you were here, you said you hate this stuff, but when you heard it, did you ever think in a million years that your children would hear it and go, wow, that's really cool?
Yeah. No, I never would.
Right?
Never.
It didn't seem important at all at the time.
If you like that sort of stuff, I know we own a station in Brainerd. I think it's the Power Loon.
Yeah.
And on Sunday mornings, they run old Casey Kasem. And it's just awesome when you hear Casey Kasem from the 70s. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, and if you don't know, and why would you if you're not in radio, that came in, initially it was an album. It was a vinyl record that you play.
Once a week you'd get it.
That
and
was the show.
Was it top 40 hits, right?
Yeah.
We're counting down the top 40
American
hits.
Top 40.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I really want to talk to Judd. Let's take a break. We'll be right back with Judd Lee. All right, we're back. Hi, Judd. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I heard your first part of your discussion about classic old school rock and roll stations and all of that. I love that stuff.
I know.
That's fantastic. And I was driving home from a hockey game last week and actually was surfing AM, BBM, WGN, which still comes in fantastic.
Yep.
As long as you are on the lower end of the dial at night, you can get a ton of stuff.
Yep.
Remember listening to WLS? Because that was back when they were music. John
Landecker.
Yeah.
John Records Landecker, they call him.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because we absolutely have to talk about hockey. But I wanted to talk about music because I thought about you Saturday night, actually, when I was watching this SNL special. And on Saturday night, it was really long, like maybe 3 hours. And it was all about the musical acts. And it was a lot of fun seeing these old acts. And then they get to the segment towards the end. And remember, I sat through all this, flipping back and forth between the hockey game and this. And so now I'm ignoring the hockey because they get to this segment where they talk about the bands that have been banned from Saturday Night Live. You may never appear there again. And I'm like, all right, I get to see our hometown boys because they got shit-faced drunk. I'm talking about the Replacements. And they were actually not bad at playing drunk, but not great. But they were
They also
drinking.
dropped an F-bomb.
Yeah. At one point, Paul turns to Bob. Paul was the singer, Westerberg, and he turns to Bob Stinson, and he says something, get it together or go for it or something, effer, right? Because I guess Bob was really, really ripped that night and actually dropped his guitar and broke it and had to play a loner. Do you remember that?
Okay,
Did you happen to watch it live? It was 1986.
I did not, but I've seen it since, and they are hammered.
Yeah.
And the backstory is they got there like in the morning to their dressing room and started to drink. And I forget who the host was.
It was
but
Harvey
he started
Keitel.
Really?
He started to drink with them. They were all hammered, including the host.
Yeah, all of them. And they had to actually be there a day or two earlier for what's called camera blocking. And they actually acted like mature adults for that and got it done. But this is a band, if the kids don't know about the Mats, boy, they sabotage themselves. I'm sorry. They were so great, and their albums were so wonderful. And Paul's such an amazing songwriter. And the reason they didn't go big is because of them. It wasn't a record company, it was them.
Could they just not behave when they were supposed to? Was that the issue?
What do you think it was, Judd? What was the sabotage thing?
I think it was their own doing. In their mind, their success was made by sabotaging themselves.
Yeah.
If you read the book that came out about 5 years ago now or so,
with Jim,
which is Bob Mayer. Who is a rock music critic, I think in Memphis.
I did. My son has it, and I read portions of it. It really upset me. It really upset me.
Why?
It's exhausting. It's exhausting because the amount of sabotage, deep amount of sabotage that they all did to their own career, very much on purpose. I have never read a book more closely, intently, but literally by the time I got done, I was exhausted.
What was the
weirdest thing?
I'm going to Google this, the last Replacements album. What was it? Because that's when Paul...
All Shook Down.
All Shook Down. Okay. So I just happened accidentally somehow at the time became friends with Chris Mars and his wife, Sally Mars, right as this album was released. And Chris was already out of the band. And they were recording a lot of it out at Paisley. And Chris would say that he'd lay down tracks during the day and then he'd come home for night and then go back out there and everything that he'd laid down had been changed and he could tell that it wasn't him drumming. And Paul really, really started taking everything really, really seriously.
And when you say Paul, you mean Paul Westerberg, for those who don't know.
Yeah.
And Chris Mars was the drummer. Was he replaced later?
Yes.
Who replaced him? Steve.
On the last tour.
Huh? Steve Foley,
who passed away.
Who's a local musician and a really good drummer. And you got to remember, even Bob, not Bob, his name is Bob, but we called him Slim Dunlap, the guitar player that replaced Bob Stinson. They were all friends. They were all close. And Bob Stinson actually taught Slim a lot of the licks and leads and stuff like that. That's how close they were.
Well, but guys, when you talk about how, and Judd, I want to go back to the book you were reading of, when you say it's exhausting, was it just the self-destruction that they just continually were a part of, or what was it?
It was there. It wasn't just the self-destruction. It was how intent they were on destroying themselves.
Yeah.
Like there was the drinking and like every time they were about to possibly break through, they would almost purposely sabotage themselves. And they were such a great band. I've always compared them a little bit as far as their issues go to Big Star in the 70s. Because Paul grew up or loved Alex Chilton, who was the
leader of Big Star and the Box
Big Star leader.
Yeah.
And Alex Chilton basically did the same thing.
Yeah.
Like he could have been huge, but he continually, there's just some weird gene here. There's something weird, but in a lot of ways, I really think that Big Star and the Replacements have a very similar path because in retrospect, they're heralded, they're darlings of the critics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the reality is for a variety of reasons, they could never get their act straight. And so like every time that it was like, okay, you're pushing, you're going good. Something would take place. So it's sad, but the SNL thing was legendary.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody talked about it. Yeah. And when I talked to Chris about it, he said, we were shit faced. We were drunk. We were partying, living it up. And there's stories. A different friend of mine, a drummer in a pretty big band in Minneapolis, said they were in New York City at the same time the Mats were. And Tommy was so drunk that he couldn't stand up, and they went to Hilly Crystal, the owner booker of CBGB's, and said, "You got to get us an 8-ball, or he's not going up." And Hilly said no, and they said, "Well, we're done. We can't go on." And the place, have you ever been to CB's? It's a hallway. Yes. It's really small.
Yes.
And it was packed. So finally somebody got them the right stuff, and Tommy did it up, and they went up and just absolutely kicked ass.
I'll never understand.
Yeah.
I mean, how many of us watched VH1 Behind the Music?
Oh, yeah.
After a while,
yeah.
the stories were all the same.
Absolutely.
This started out that they were these young kids who learned to play guitar and formed a band in their garage, and then things started getting better, and it's just like Judd just said. And then this guy developed a drug problem, and that guy was having sex with the other guy's girlfriend, and then they fought. Every single story ends the same. And what is it about people who play musical instruments that they can't get their shit together?
It's the artist thing. It's the artist thing. They don't exist in the real 9-to-5 punch a time clock, pay a mortgage type of world. I think they're just artists. Artists are different.
Well, and you guys were just talking about this SNL thing. Think about that. 1986, and it's still true to this day to a lesser extent, but 1986, career-making appearances were on Saturday Night Live.
Absolutely.
It was right? So you leave Minneapolis, you go out to do Saturday Night Live.
Yes, thank you.
And you decide that's a good time to get so shit-faced that you can't play the instrument that you're there to play.
They are revered and loved, and people think that they're a real legend, but a lot of us in the Twin Cities who were living, when they were playing, we didn't really respect them. At least I didn't. I love their albums, but it seemed like if you see them 3 times, you might see one good show because they're just goofballing the whole time. And Bob would,
and there were also
go ahead.
The band next door. Like it's hard to when they're playing because they were playing here constantly, right?
Yeah.
First Ave, Uncle Sam's before that.
Yep.
So it's easy to take for granted. You don't hear Paul's, first couple of albums and think, "Oh my God, this is a huge thing." 40 years from now, they'll be talking about this.
Right.
You're just like, it's Paul. And he's drunk again, to your point.
Yeah. And the same with Bob. Even when Bob, after he was out of the band, he was always walking around Uptown. And his mom was bartending at the Uptown bar. And so you'd always see Bob sitting on the sidewalk out front of the Uptown. And you'd always buy Bob a beer. And it's just the way it was. One night, in the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep for... I'm not going to tell you why I couldn't sleep, but I was out on Lake of the Isles on the ice walking around, and there's a guy walking at me. It's like 3 a.m. It's Bob Stinson. I meet Bob Stinson on Lake of the Isles in the middle of winter at 3 a.m. Hi, Bob. How you doing? Just out for a walk.
I'm equally fascinated by the fact that you couldn't sleep, so you went and not just walked, but walked on Lake of the Isles.
Yeah.
Frozen ice. That's a strange thing to do.
Not a smart kid. I want to talk about a different aspect of Saturday Night Live in the 50th special. I could talk about it for hours, but the one story that came out of this that I really love, and it came from Nate Bargatze. I watch his podcast, which is called Nateland, and he was there for the SNL thing. He got into town on Wednesday night because he thought they were going to have to practice. Practice was called off. He calls, in his word, Texas Spade. That's what he calls him. Spade, Texas Rock. They end up going to, I think it's called the Comedy Cellar. Mm-hmm. They go up. Bargatze goes up, does a few minutes, introduces Spade. Spade goes up, does a few minutes, and then Rock goes up. Later, they find out from the club owner that Steve Martin was there. Steve Martin opened the show, did a few minutes, brought Martin Short up. Short did a few minutes, and then they did a few minutes together. And then John Mulaney went up, and then later Leslie Jones went up.
Oh my gosh! All on the same night?
Can you imagine? You pay $18 to go to the cellar.
That's what I was going to ask. Oh,
just to see some random comics. Now, I'm wondering if the comedian fans in New York are smart enough to realize that we could see something special. Let's go to the cellar and hang out.
I bet they are.
Yeah.
Probably, but not that. Like, that's over the top.
That's amazing.
Steve Martin?
Yeah. When's the last time he did a set? So evidently he did the opening on Sunday night, right? So he just worked on his opening. Yes. And Marty was there, or Martin Short. Yeah.
What a lineup. That's really, I bet there was tourists in that audience too that were just
had to be.
Wow, how did I luck into this?
So have you guys ever seen anything like that where you've been at a bar, a club, anywhere, and it's like all of a sudden there's a huge celebrity performing for you?
No.
Not that, no.
Yeah.
No.
The closest I can come is when Nirvana was recording down in Northfield. Remember that studio in the woods down there?
Pachyderm, right?
Yeah.
Pachyderm.
They would come up into town. Everybody but Kurt would come into town. So you'd see Dave all the time, and that bass player, I think Chris is his name. So you'd see him around, and he was friends with the gals and babes in Toyland. So, but I've never seen Kurt Cobain in the wild other than on stage.
I don't think a lot of people did.
Yeah, so a buddy of mine and I went to the show at Roy Wilkins here.
Yeah, I was at that show too.
I think it was I think it was shortly before he died. I think it was, I remember it was a day like today. It was miserably cold outside.
Yep.
And then I think he died that spring.
Yep.
But
April.
I mean, they were phenomenal.
Yeah.
They were phenomenal.
Yeah, really good act. A lot of fun. I saw him in the entry in the main room and then at Roy Wilkins. The entry show is just by accident. I didn't even know who was on stage that night. Just walked in there and these kids are in there just making the worst raucous noise you've ever heard. It was before their first album came out, and those albums were very different from their first big album. Yeah.
Much harder.
Yeah. Oh, really hard. Did anything from the 50th anniversary show, anything stick with you?
You know what stuck with me? Because no show in its right mind gets to be 50 years old. What stuck with me was and I don't blame them because I don't know how you do this, but people our age, I think, can appreciate this. The complete inability to understand, like when they showed the really old clips, right? Like the first cast. Yeah. And you watch it now and you're like, I bet the majority of people don't think that this is funny. But at the time, it was great. And one of the things that I don't think people can get is that was such a different drug-influenced era.
Yeah.
And what was perceived as funny. Yeah. Like, it's impossible to, like, in 2025, when you watch that, you sort of had to be there at the time. Like, the Chevy Chase doing Gerald Ford, right?
Yeah.
He literally does no costume.
No.
The whole thing is to moderately sound like Ford and, more importantly, just trip.
Fall.
And it was hilarious.
Down.
And now you watch it and you're like, if you're 30, there is no way that you can get that at that time. Like, you didn't have to do makeup. You didn't have to sound like him, really. You just fell, and it was great. But, I mean, that original cast had so many things, I think, that at the time were just hilarious. And now it's like there's no way to really grasp that.
Do you remember the film, and they showed it on Sunday night, that Belushi made in the snowy graveyard where he's talking about all his dead castmates?
Yes.
And he was actually the first to go.
That was so weird.
It was eerie and weird and kind of upsetting.
It was one of those things you didn't know what to do with it.
Right. But it had to be aired.
Is this right? For sure. Yeah. But is this... it was not funny. It was disturbing.
Yeah.
But it was interesting.
But the show took chances like that then quite a bit. And like, cause they did some stuff that was hilarious, but they did some weird stuff and dependent on the host, they did some really weird stuff. I went back and watched, I forgot that there was one when Charles Grodin, for the one and only time, he hosted the show with the meta idea that he was going to have no idea that it was live, and he was going to do everything he could to screw up every sketch. And everybody was in on it, but they acted offended by it.
Yeah.
And like the whole show was done. And again, I'm sure that they were all stoned out of their gourd and all that.
Yeah.
But like, can you imagine now saying, okay, I'm going to act like I don't know that the show is live. I'm going to actually disrupt all the skits, but I want in on all of the skits as much as possible. I mean, think about
Kanye. That seems like something Kanye would do.
Right. Well, or even, do you remember the Andy Kaufman thing?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was like, I remember as a kid, I would have been, I guess, late 70s. I just remember looking at, to give people some idea who have never seen it. The only thing I remember is him sitting there doing a Mighty Mouse thing, right?
Yes.
And
here I am to save the day.
And for no reason. I mean, there was no context outside of that.
Right.
It was just him doing that. But can you imagine somebody just going on live television nowadays and singing Mighty Mouse for 3 minutes?
How high do you have to be to come up with the bees skit where you're all wearing bee costumes? Right. Seriously.
Right. Or even, frankly, the Coneheads. You know, or any of that stuff. There was so much stuff back then. It was, I feel like, to your point, Judd, it felt more slapsticky back then.
Yeah.
I feel like it's more like cerebral now, where back then it really was more about physical comedy, I think.
But what came before them that would have influenced them? Steve Allen?
You know what I think it was? I mean, really, I don't know for sure, actually, but I would imagine, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. It was Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In.
Oh, of course.
You know, it was those kind of shows. It was Carol Burnett to a small degree because they aired about the same time.
That was a really good show, Carol Burnett show.
I mean, I love sketch comedy. I think a lot of us who came of age in the SNL era, and then there was SCTV on top of it, Second City Television, which was a whole similar show but different flavor. That, I mean, it's just, and to your point, Judd, when you talk about why was it funny that he was doing President Ford with no wig, no makeup, he didn't look anything like him, you know, but where would we have seen anyone on television, live no less, mimicking a current president who's in office and making him look like a doofus who falls down all the time? Nobody was doing that.
I don't think so. Not to my memory.
Nope.
My favorite,
not at that time.
My favorite skit from Sunday night was also the one that disappointed me the most because I thought it was going so well. The Black Jeopardy skit, when you have Eddie Murphy doing Tracy Morgan right next to Tracy Morgan. Oh my God, I was howling. And then they pulled Eddie, which I can't believe anybody would pull Eddie, and they put Tom Hanks' dumb white guy out there, which is just, to me, it's not funny. But Eddie Murphy was hysterical. He does Tracy Morgan better than Tracy Morgan. And to me, that was just brought me so much joy. And that's the one for me that really,
fantastic.
What was your favorite part of it, Judd? What was your, like, what's the thing that hits you?
Boy, a lot of different things, but I would say the opening with Steve Martin and then Mulaney comes on and busts Steve's chops.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. Because the thing now is, like, the one thing where the old shows kick the new show's ass is the monologue. Like now it's you bring somebody else on or you get some help, but I mean back then they sent you out there to die. And a lot of and guys like Steve Martin thrived. Like I had no idea who he was until at SNL. And Mulaney's great. I think he is hilarious.
He is very funny.
Like I think he is just like the delivery is just second to none. So I like that. I was a little bit surprised. I didn't know that they were going to do as many fresh skits. I thought it would be more of a retrospective look back.
So did I.
So I was surprised. But Kenny, I am with you totally. Why you would put Tom Hanks in at the end of that? Because it derailed it and it wasn't funny.
No.
And before that, it was hilarious.
Yeah. Leslie Jones couldn't keep it together, which normally I don't like when they break character, but it's like, girl, I don't blame you because this is so stupid. It's just a riot. Did you think, you guys, maybe that they tried to cram too many people into this?
I can't even imagine, having done like way smaller, less important scale things than that. How would you even begin to plan the show? Yeah. Because most of these people, frankly, are still alive. I mean, there's obviously there's a list of probably 10 or maybe more that have passed, but most of them are still alive. How do you choose?
It'd be fun to find out when the writing for this show started. I bet you it was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Oh, I bet it's before that. I mean, I think it's been years.
Yeah, you can't put this together in a week or even a month.
Well, even to go back through an archive. And then I think they had to strike this balance of a lot of the, like, my child is 24.
Yes.
And is familiar with probably going as far back as Will Ferrell and forward.
Yeah.
But like all the stuff we're talking about, Judd, you know, the Chevy Chases and the Bill Murrays, they've never seen those casts, don't particularly care. So you have to go into that show as Lorne Michaels and his producers and think, who are we catering to here? There's going to be people our age that want to see the old stuff, right? The Gilda Radners and Lorraine Newman and John Belushi, never Jim. And then there's then there's the kids that really are their bread and butter now on YouTube that are 18 to 34.
Yeah.
And they love Kristen Wiig and they love,
she's so good though.
She's the best. I think she's the best ever. Honestly, of the I don't want to split it into female male cast, but of the female cast that they've ever had, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is our greatest living comedy actress, I think. Maybe of all time, but I think Kristen Wiig's characters are amazing.
Year, right?
Yeah, I think it was just 1 year.
Bounced after a year.
It was that bad cast that the whole cast I think only lasted 1 year.
Yeah, he fired them all, right?
Yep, he did.
I will say this. I think if you took everyone living or dead as far as the female cast goes, I think Gilda's one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she's my favorite. I mean,
you're right.
You know, the characters she did, Rosanna Dana.
So great.
Hilarious.
Baba Wawa.
The little girl.
The Never Mind lady.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Never mind.
Matilda, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I still remember Lorraine Newman's character where she was, I still this day think it's funny. She was a child psychologist who was a child. So people would come in to talk about their psychological problems. She was like, her legs were like hanging off her chair, like, so what's bothering you?
I wonder if it's still funny today. Like you said earlier, if we watch the whole skit, would it be as funny now?
You know, Judd, don't you think the rhythm, either one of you, the rhythm of comedy is so different now? I feel like it was slower then.
Yeah.
You know,
we let things develop longer.
Yeah.
During a scene. Yeah.
Yeah.
I met Kristen Wiig at the station.
Oh, I love her so much.
It was during Bridesmaids, right? So on Saturday night, I happened to be watching SNL, and they had Helen Mirren on. Now, do you know about Helen? Her bosoms are magical. They've long been considered magical. And they did a skit that night where all the female cast members came up to Helen and grabbed her bosoms for good luck, right? So she's in the building on the following Monday, and she comes up to radio, and I think she might have done Low J because it was in the afternoon. And she's standing in the hallway right by Dan's office, and I came up to her and I shook her hand and I said, I just wanted to shake the hand that touched Helen Mirren's bosoms. And she goes, well, that's really creepy.
Well, because it is. Because it is.
So that's my Kristen, my Kristen story. Let's change the subject and talk hockey when we come back. So last Thursday, completely by accident, Judd, I turned into the Four Nations NHL hockey tournament thing. And I had heard a little bit about it, but I thought, well, this is going to be stupid. This is the worst idea ever. And Amy, are you into hockey?
I am not.
So instead of having an all-star game, that's fine. instead of I'm not into the NFL, so instead of having a boring all-star game, they decided to pit Canada, the United States, Finland, and Sweden against each other for a week, and just to have games, and you rise to the top of with the bracket or whatever, right? And right away, Judd, even though I thought this was dumb, I'm like, oh my God, these guys are really skating. I mean, they're really, really trying hard. And the thing that struck me right away on Thursday was, how can these guys be so good together when they're not on the same team? What is that about hockey players where strangers gel right away? Did you notice that?
It's the best. Oh yeah, it's the best players in the world, and so one is I'm willing to bet that guys of a certain age have played together on different all-star teams before. But the thing about this entire tournament, the thing that amazes me, is there was a large faction of people who said, "Well, it's an all-star game replacement; it's going to suck."
Yeah,
These guys, the young guys playing. The last time that they did what they call in hockey a best on best tournament, the last time was 2016. So a lot of the young guys now didn't play in that, right?
Right. Yeah.
This when you put your country's flag on, it changes everything.
Yeah.
And when you're playing against the best for that, now what I cautioned, what I didn't like, and what has come to pass is we are now entering the most important part of the National Hockey League season, and guys are hurt.
Right.
Which is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
But the hockey's been terrific.
Yeah.
It's been absolutely fantastic. And that game on Saturday between the U.S. and Canada, which featured, Amy, I kid you not, 3 fights in the first 9 seconds.
I just
we had
read
3
that.
fights in the first 9 seconds.
I just read that getting ready to talk to you, Judd. How is that even physically possible? How do you start a fight? 3 fights in 9 seconds?
So before the face-off, so the clock is still at 20 minutes, right?
Okay.
Two guys said, we're going to fight. So the game starts, they fight, clock stops. Then during that break, Matthew Tkachuk, who got in the fight from the American team, his brother Brady orchestrates another fight.
Right away.
So they drop the puck again.
Yep.
Fight starts. Stop the clock. And then the fight that I think occurred around 7 seconds and took till 9 was the third guy, I believe, on that line got on the ice and started a third fight. That is how you get 3 fights within 9 seconds.
And it all originated, and I was really surprised about this because I was watching this SNL thing, and as always, when we're watching TV, we've got our phone in our hand, right? I'm like, what the hell is going on in this hockey game? The Canadians booed the American anthem. My friends, the Canadians, who I love so much, and I always cheer for their teams, booed the American anthem. And isn't that what led to these fights?
Well, partially. I think what led to the fights was it was a Saturday night in Montreal. Intensity was high. And I think that the U.S. team wanted to show the Canadian team that they could not only stand up to them, but push them around. But the political nature of what is taking place definitely is playing a role in an underlying hatred that I would argue has never existed before until now between Canada and us.
Ever. We've always loved those dummies, and they put up with us. And it's always been awesome.
Well, and it just seems like when you say there were 3 fights in 9 seconds and that this has come down to this, like, nation versus nation. How, in what universe is Canada? That's like going down to your nicest neighbor who shovels your driveway and knocking on their door, and they open it, and then you just punch them right in the face. Like, Canada doesn't get mad at anyone, and they hate us.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
I know.
Judd, so in a lot of these hockey fights, these guys, they'll agree to drop gloves ahead of time. Sometimes a minute, 2 minutes, or the previous period. It's like, next period, we're going to go. And they're like, all right, we'll go. Do you think there was any of that kind of discussion before those fights? Or do you think it was, we're going to fight? How was it? How do you think that played out?
I think the first fight, which was Tkachuk against, I believe his name is Brandon Hagel, who's Canadian but plays for Tampa Bay. And Matthew Tkachuk plays for the Florida Panthers. So they play a lot.
Yeah.
And I think they agreed to fight immediately. And then I think when Hagel and Kachuk were being put in the penalty box, Brady Kachuk, Matt's brother, set up his fight. So I think that they were agreed to.
Yeah.
But it was. I don't think it is like the way that the country now. It's hilarious. This is it's fun hockey, okay? But Amy, this is a made up tournament. This is not an Olympics. This is a made up tournament.
Yeah.
And the U.S. now is like like there are people in the deep south like, I'm going to watch hockey. You don't care about hockey. It's not even the Olympics.
Yeah. Okay, can I ask a question as I'm listening to you guys talk about this? And Judd, you're a hockey expert. When you said, I don't follow hockey, but I've lived in Minnesota my whole life. I'm surrounded by hockey people. I've been to hockey games. But here's what I don't get. And I'm asking this like legit. When you say before the game started, they arranged a fight, why?
Go ahead, Judd.
Oh, no.
I mean, let me ask, is it like, is it like WWE? Like that's the entertainment value, or is there real, like, they just like to fight?
A little bit of both. And by arranged, I think that they get in the circle to prepare for the face-off, and a guy will ask. The one thing about the sport now that's changed from its heyday of fighting in the 70s is they now sort of agree. Like if you ask me to fight and I say no, there's a good chance that you're not going to jump me. No. Back in the day, you just got jumped. Like nobody said, will you fight? They just dropped the gloves and fought, and if you didn't fight back, I would just go nuts. So, like, this is not the old school stuff, because the old school stuff bordered on assault. I don't think
that's crazy.
We have a lot of assaults now.
Yeah, that was crazy. Well, I mean, to walk in and have 3 fights in 9 seconds, that's more moderate. But like back in, you guys, honestly, from my perspective, not being like a hockey fanatic like you are, Judd, and know what you do, it sounds a little mentally ill.
Well,
all sports is.
Yeah.
Let's make no mistake. Yeah. Mentally ill. Let's talk about football. Yeah. No, you're
but that's even wrong. Actually, I would argue the other side of that in football they are brutalizing each other, but they've got all the equipment to protect them, and when they fight, they stop it immediately. Yeah. In hockey, they don't.
To me, football is Hollywood. I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. I can't watch football.
And it's not even about and I totally understand that. But with hockey, Judd, that's honestly from just a non-hockey fanatic's perspective. I don't want to make it all about this, but I don't understand how a sport, one of the marquee things about it is that guys look at each other like at the face-off and like, we gonna want to go? Yeah, let's go.
That's basically it.
It's so
weird.
It's
hard to defend that.
You just did a perfect impersonation of what happened Saturday night.
Yeah. You want to go? Okay, let's go.
What was I going to say?
It's so bizarre.
Yeah,
and I mean, but I love it because I've been in Minnesota all my life, so I'm used to the talk about it. But I don't.
But Amy, it's really turned into a fast, skill-based game. It is an absolute riot to watch these guys, and it's the only sport where even with the sound off, I'm yelling at the TV because I'm pissed off at the Wild for not scoring on a power play. It's the only sport that does that to me. That and maybe some dirt track racing, but other than that. So I wanted to ask you, Joe, on what was it, Sunday night or Monday night? We lost to Sweden, right?
Sweden, Monday night.
We didn't even show up for that game. That was an all-star
No, because
game.
They had a spot in tonight's final clinched.
Yeah.
But they gave out 3 points for wins, 2 points for a win in overtime or a shootout, and 1 point for a loss in OT or a shootout. So by winning the first 2 games, the U.S. had clinched a spot. And in fact, they sat out 3-4 guys. Yeah. So but here's the thing that the league is going to love. These games, and tonight will be another example, have done huge, by hockey standards, huge ratings.
Really?
Huge ratings.
Do you
The
think,
game on
Judd,
Saturday
do you
was
think
watched.
I'm sorry. Do you think it's the
Oh, no,
division
no,
of the,
go
it's
ahead.
the thing that you were talking about earlier, that it's divided by country? Is that, do you think that's the stickiness of it?
Yes. Well, and especially in the States here, I think the fact that this is sold and, you know, because of the climate too, like if you put the flag on something now, I think it gets more attention. And so, yes, because the estimated audience in the United States for Saturday's game was 4.4 million people, which is the most since Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals last June.
Wow.
So, like a regular season game doesn't come near that.
That's
so the league's going
incredible.
to love this, Ken.
Yeah. Judd, I don't think, I can't remember ever being this excited for a game as I am tonight. I am really, really hyped and amped about this game tonight. And I'm really going to be disappointed if it's one-sided either way.
And what are you excited about, Kenny? Like, what about it is...
The buildup, the fight on Saturday night, the fact that after the fights, we kicked their ass. We really skated well. We looked awesome. And just everything that's going on right now between the country, the USA and Canada, which is just such nonsense. And the fact that we have somehow become arch enemies. And I think it's pride of being an American. God bless America, Amy Daniels.
Yeah,
And-
let's go show those really arch enemy countries, Finland, Sweden, and Canada.
I know. Judd, what's
If
going
I
to
may.
happen? Yeah, go ahead, please.
If I may, let me say this. This is what I love about us, 2025, okay? In 1980, a group of young men in Lake Placid, with the Cold War going on with big bad Russia, who everyone hated.
Yeah.
A group of young men beat this basically Russian professional team.
Yeah.
And it was one of the greatest moments in sports history.
Yeah,
like it was
absolutely.
embraced, rightfully so. Left a mark on everybody who was alive at the time.
Yeah.
In 2025, it's going to be Canada and the U.S. and the badness of, I guess, our country or the poor Canadians is potential tariffs, and we're looking at this sucker like we're playing the Russians.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous.
It's bizarre.
It's so ridiculous.
Even knowing that, I can't stop myself from being really, really into it. Really into
And
it.
that's
great game.
okay. I can't work up a high passion for beating up on Canada under any circumstances.
I think, Judd, for the first time, and I'm ashamed to say this right to your face, I'm so amped up about this that I actually listened to watched your hockey show this morning.
Wow.
Yeah, that's because I wanted to hear what you guys talked about. And I like your analogy, and we might have talked about this a little bit before we went on. If the USA loses, I think it's going to be, whatever. But if Canada loses... Oh, those poor bastards. Oh, my goodness. I know they're going to lose, but I really feel sorry for Canadians if they lose.
Oh, they'll be polite about it.
Well,
They always are.
They'll be in mourning.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Judd,
And remember, Amy,
Like they'll
the
be polite, but in mourning.
game's in Boston, and Boston fans are bastards.
Oh, yeah.
They are ruthless.
second
So
only to Philadelphia fans.
Well, right. And the Canadian anthem, which I love and I sing along with, it's the best anthem in the whole world. It's going to get booed in Boston. Yeah.
Right. Judd, when you were in the building more often, I mean, you still obviously work here. I just don't get to see you as much. You were one of my favorite people to talk to, and it's just a joy having you on.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I miss
appreciate
the
that.
days of Judd doing I don't know if it was Facebook or Twitter lives in the parking lot on his phone as he's walking in from his car to the building. It's like, oh, be quiet. Judd's on the air right now.
I wasn't on the air. I'm just recording. It was fine. Yeah,
Right.
Twitter.
Thank you, Judd. This has been so much fun. I'm really happy you
Awesome
showed
stuff.
up.
And
guys. Thank
continued
you.
success on everything you guys are doing on SKOR North and Purple Daily and Judd's Hockey Show. And thank you.
And thank you for everybody
very
for
much, guys.
watching and listening to News from the Krabby Coffee Shop. We'll see you next week.
Judd.